Srila Prabhupada Lilamrta, Additional Pastimes, Around the World, 1967 to 1969 and 1972 to 1975, Additional Pastimes of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, by Satsvarup Das Goswami. Chapter 2, Opening a Temple in Los Angeles. January 6, 1968. The building at 5364 West Pico Boulevard was a small storefront in a middle-class black neighborhood of Los Angeles. With his key, Aniruddha opened the rear door, and Srila Prabhupada entered, followed by a few disciples. The room was stark. A Brijabasi print of Lord Krishna sat atop the altar, which was no more than 2 orange crates covered with an old madras. A tambura and a mridanga on end stood in one corner, and a curtain hung over the front window. Prabhupada's seat, a simple raised platform, was the only furniture. Prabhupada, dressed in saffron robes and walking with a cane, crossed the room, opened the front door, and stepped outside. Glancing up and down the street, he saw small, run-down houses. It was a quiet, out-of-the-way neighborhood, unlike the more vital locations his disciples had found in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury and Manhattan's Lower East Side. But it was a place in Los Angeles, a start. Prabhupada stepped back inside and shut the door. Aniruddha Dayananda, his wife Nandarani, and their 3-week-old daughter Chandramukhi were there. The members of the Los Angeles Temple. Several other devotees who had driven down a few days earlier from San Francisco were also there and stood anxiously around Prabhupada, waiting to hear what he would say. Prabhupada looked around carefully. "All right," he said, "let us have kirtan." And picking up the mridanga, he sat down on the small platform while his disciples sat down before him on the floor. No sooner had he begun to play, however, when Janaki rushed over to him carrying the tambura. "Swamiji," she said, "you can't play the drum. You're not well enough. Play this." Her reprimand was motherly. Prabhupada was 72, and only 6 months ago he had been hospitalized after a heart attack and stroke. He had only recently returned from India, where he had gone to recuperate. Naturally, his disciples were concerned about his health. "All right," Prabhupada smiled, trading instruments with Janaki. "Then I will play tambura." As Srila Prabhupada softly plucked the metal strings, his disciples clapped the 1-2-3 rhythm. Prabhupada chanted, "Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare." With his traditional Bengali melody, he led the singing, joining with his disciples on the chorus. As Prabhupada's disciples sat earnestly chanting before him, some of them looking up to him, others singing with eyes closed, he looked at each disciple. Nervous, timid Aniruddha was there. He blushed easily, and his bespectacled eyes squinted when he smiled. Tall, lean Dayananda was there. He had a good job as a computer technician for RCA, and he was giving $200 monthly to support the temple he and his wife had started. Srila Prabhupada had been in India when Dayananda and Nandarani had moved to Los Angeles and found this little storefront. Immediately they had written to him about the new temple and the warm, sunny Los Angeles climate, which they said would be good for his health. He had expressed his eagerness to join them. Quote, "I am pleased that our desire is fulfilled by the grace of Lord Krishna. Your specific duty is to chant and hear the transcendental name of the Lord, read some passages from my English version of the Srimad Bhagavatam and Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Gitopanishad, and explain them as far as possible as you have heard from me. Any devotee who has developed genuine love for Krishna can also explain the truth about Krishna, because Krishna helps such sincere devotee seated in his heart." Unquote. Dayananda and Nandarani had written to Prabhupada that people in Los Angeles weren't as receptive as in San Francisco and New York, but Prabhupada had assured them that if they chanted with devotion, success would come. Krishna would help them. In his room at the Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan, Prabhupada had meditated on sending young men and women like Dayananda and Nandarani all over the world to open Krishna-conscious centers. Despite old age and ill health, this was his life's ambition, his single dominating desire. And in whatever time he had left, he wanted to establish the Krishna consciousness movement worldwide. His success in America over the past 2 years had given him hope. Mukunda had begun a temple in San Francisco, Kirtanananda had begun one in Montreal, Satsvarup in Boston, Subala in Santa Fe, and Brahmananda had stayed in New York. These temples were storefronts only, and the leaders young, inexperienced men. But the Western youth were showing interest. There was great potential. After the kirtan, Dayananda drove Prabhupada to his apartment 2 miles away. It was small, a front room, a kitchenette, a back room with a tiny bathroom, and noisy. Aniruddha had arranged for Gaurasundar and his wife Govinda Dasi, who were acting as Prabhupada's servant and secretary, to stay in the front room. Prabhupada said his health was still not good. His sleep was often disturbed, and he spoke of a gong, gong, gong sound in his head. He had occasional headaches and a ringing in his left ear. An Ayurvedic doctor in India had told him to take cinnamon buds, and he had seen a doctor in San Francisco, but the doctor's prescriptions had not helped. Quote, "I may inform you in that connection that I am at the present moment physically unfit. I am having always a buzzing sound in my brain. I cannot sleep at night, but still I am working because I try to be on my position of spiritual platform." Unquote. Prabhupada was in good spirits, however, despite his age and lingering sickness. He appeared strong, and 6 months in India had tanned him a golden, healthy hue. He always sat straight and smiled often. He walked with a cane, yet upright, with a quick step, tiring his young disciples who attempted to keep up with him. He even mentioned that, if his inability to sleep continued, he would have more time for writing his books. Gone was the mindlessness of his young followers who had previously thought that Swamiji, because he was a pure devotee, should be let to do any strenuous activities he liked, working all night or singing and playing the mridanga for hours in the park. Now the devotees had become concerned and protective, trying always to arrange for his ease, suggesting when they thought something was too strenuous for him. Usually, however, Prabhupada would give the last word on what he would or would not do. When Jamuna and Janaki arrived from San Francisco, they decided that if Swamiji were to get well, he would require a special diet. So they devised a regimen featuring small servings of boiled vegetables without salt, spices, or ghee. At first, Prabhupada gently submitted to their requests, but on trying their meals, he commented, "These vegetables are nasty. They are not fit for eating." After 3 days, when Govinda Dasi told him of some new reductions in his diet, he roared, "Let the starvation committee go to hell. You feed me." Again, Prabhupada began taking his regular lunch, dal, rice, chapatis, and a couple of sabjis with ghee. One day, when Govinda Dasi brought him his lunch, he commented, "Oh, this is very nice. When I was in India, everyone told me, 'Oh, Swamiji, you cannot go to America. You will starve there. They have no food. They eat only meat and potatoes.' So I said, 'What is that? I shall live on bread and potatoes. There is no problem. I can survive on bread and potatoes.' So I was thinking like that when I came to your country, that I shall live on bread and potatoes." But now I have come here, and Krishna is so kind. He has not only given me everything in the way of nice food, but you are also cooking all sorts of nice vegetable preparations. Chapatis, dal, rice, everything is there. So this is Krishna's kindness. Although when Prabhupada had first arrived in America, he had been alone and had had difficulty finding even a single sincere person, now he was surrounded by sincere students eager to learn from him. Still, he accepted this new position in the same spirit as he had accepted the lonely months in New York City. He was doing his beloved duty to his spiritual master, writing books, seeking to engage others in the Krishna consciousness mission, and speaking about Krishna always. Sometimes, as Prabhupada would shuffle through the apartment in his slippers, he would see Gaurasundar and Govinda Dasi seated at the kitchen table practicing their first lessons in the Bengali alphabet. He had given them a Bengali verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita to memorize, and regularly he would drill them to see if they knew it. Vande Sri Krishna Chaitanya Nityanando Sahodito Godo Daye Pushpavanto Chitro Shangdo Tamo Nado. Footnote. I offer my respectful obeisances to Sri Krishna Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, who are like the sun and moon. They have arisen simultaneously on the horizon of Goda to dissipate the darkness of ignorance, and thus wonderfully bestow benediction upon all. Looking over their shoulders, Prabhupada remarked, "This is very nice, just like a child is learning to write. His writing may not be perfect, it may be crooked or imperfect, but the teacher wants to see that the students are trying. It doesn't matter how well they are doing, but just that they are fully engaged. So it is just like our service to Krishna. What can we do for Krishna? Krishna is everything. He doesn't need our service, but he wants to see that we are trying. We are trying a little bit to give him service. That is the whole idea." It was only 4 days after Prabhupada's arrival. He had just risen from an afternoon rest, walked into the front room, and there was Subala. Prabhupada was surprised. Subala was supposed to be in Santa Fe. "My wife has left me," Subala burst out, and a sad tale followed. Subala told how he had left his wife, Krishna Devi Dasi, alone at the Santa Fe temple for a few days and had gone to New York to visit his parents. Meanwhile, Krishna Devi had run away with a boy who had been visiting the temple, and she had decided to stay with him and give up her husband. "Don't worry," Prabhupada told Subala. "Everything will be all right. I will write a letter to Krishna Devi and tell her to come back to you. You can go back to Santa Fe tomorrow, and everything will be all right." Subala left the next morning for Santa Fe, and Prabhupada, although calm in Subala's presence, began to show deep disturbance over the sordid affair. Krishna Devi was his disciple, and he had performed the sacred marriage ceremony for her and Subala. He had asked them to be an ideal couple, cooperating together in Krishna consciousness. Together they had gone to start the center in New Mexico. "Don't be discouraged," he told them. "Even though no one may come to hear you, still you chant and hear." But now Krishna Devi had simply left the temple and her husband. When Subala arrived in Santa Fe, he found that Krishna Devi and her boyfriend Randy had left town. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Prabhupada received a letter from Krishna Devi. She said she wanted to stay in Krishna consciousness but with her new boyfriend. "This is all nonsense," Prabhupada exclaimed. "I will simply go back to Vrindavan and sit and chant Hare Krishna. Why should I do this? Why should I deal with this quarrel between husband and wife? This is not the business of a sannyasi." Prabhupada wrote a letter to Krishna Devi in care of the Santa Fe temple. Quote, "Your recent activities have been very much upsetting to each and every member of our society. I never expected that you shall act in this way. If you love me at all, and Krishna at all, you should immediately return back either to me or to your husband without delay. In your letter it is understood that you are repenting. You have done a great mistake. Come back, and everything will be all right." Unquote. To Srila, Prabhupada wrote, quote, "I am very sorry to learn about your present plight. You must be feeling a great shock for the separation, but there is a great lesson also. Anyway, if you are feeling too heavy-hearted, you may come here and live with me for some time. I hope I shall be able to ease your heaviness." Unquote. But before Prabhupada's letter arrived, Srila had already left Santa Fe for Los Angeles thinking, "I can't take this anymore. I'm going back to Swamiji." Sitting on his porch taking his noontime massage, Prabhupada suddenly saw Srila, looking more miserable than ever, coming up the sidewalk. "Srila," Prabhupada called out, remaining seated. Srila approached and offered obeisances before Srila Prabhupada, who sat in the California sunshine and dressed only in an Indian gangcha, while Gaurasundar massaged him with mustard oil. "You did not get my letter?" Prabhupada asked. "No," Srila replied. "Yes," Prabhupada nodded. "You have got my letter. I have written you and told you that if you are feeling too heavy-hearted, you may come here and live with me for some time." Srila: "So I moved into the crowded front room of Swamiji's apartment. I slept in the living room right outside of Swamiji's room, and there was only a curtain separating us. At night I could hear him dictating Srimad Bhagavatam. He asked me to carve some Radha Krishna deities for him. I had already carved some Jagannath deities, and now Swamiji said he wanted Radha Krishna deities carved. So I bought a block of mahogany and began carving Radha Krishna." Prabhupada received word from Rai Ram in New York that his editing of the Bhagavad Gita manuscript was nearing completion. When Prabhupada read Rai Ram's letter, he exploded. "Nearing completion? I heard this before I started for India." Rai Ram's slow editing was delaying the manuscript too much. Although the contract with Macmillan Company had already been signed, the manuscript had still not been submitted. Seeing Rai Ram's editing as a perpetual delay, Prabhupada decided Rai Ram should immediately stop all other duties and come to Los Angeles. After a few days, Rai Ram arrived. He too settled into the crowded front room of Swamiji's tiny apartment, picking a corner for himself where he could work on the Bhagavad Gita manuscript. After having spoken in the temple in Swamiji's presence one night, Rai Ram wrote home to the devotees in New York. Quote, "Although his health is delicate, he is not to be held back. After all that activity last night, he continued talking to us when we returned, and then got up at 2:30 a.m. this morning and worked for 3 hours. He just returned now from a 2.5-mile morning walk. So he's not exactly weak or failing. And if we say anything to check him, he tells that this life has no value if it is not used for Krishna." Last week, Garga Muni was telling Swamiji that he sometimes dreams of how to sell things, and Swamiji said that he also dreams of preaching. But he told us last night that when he's speaking of Krishna, there is no pain. Unquote. One day on a walk, Prabhupada discovered a special place across the street from his apartment. There, on a neighbor's front lawn, stood a broad, tall tree. Taking a few disciples with him, Prabhupada went over and sat down beneath the tree. On a warm Los Angeles afternoon, this was a great but simple luxury, sitting in the pleasant sunny atmosphere beneath the shade tree. Rai Ram considered the occasion something to write to the devotees in New York about. Quote, "This afternoon, I took a stroll to the temple, which is some distance away, and when I returned, I found Swamiji crossing the street from his house accompanied by Gaurasundar. So I trailed them up close. Swamiji took his seat under a big oak tree, which grows close by our house across the street. Meditation under a tree is very nice, he said after a few minutes. As we sat there, other devotees came and joined us, all sitting around Swamiji on some unknown person's lawn under their tree. Therefore, in former times, sages used to seat themselves under trees and teach. I know that I am a worthless fool. Here I sit at Swamiji's feet, and my tears aren't flowing, or my heart breaking with joy. But even for a fool, Swamiji's presence is intoxicating in the extreme." Unquote. Swamiji said that saintly persons in India often sat under trees and even lived there with no other shelter. The 6 Goswamis who wrote books under the order of Lord Chaitanya lived this way in Vrindavan, staying each night under a different tree and compiling sublime Sanskrit literatures. Hearing Swamiji speak on such transcendental subjects in this setting fit perfectly the devotees' ideal notions of the Guru beneath an ancient towering banyan tree in India. It didn't seem to them that they were sitting in an ordinary neighborhood in Los Angeles. Often, Aniruddha would return to the apartment after shopping or errands, and he would see, from afar, this gorgeous-looking, saffron-robed person sitting there on the grassy lawn. One day, as Subala, Govindadasi, Roy Ram, and others sat with Prabhupada in the shade, Prabhupada observed a pair of white butterflies. "Just see these worms," he said, pointing to the butterflies. "Here also there is husband and wife. The whole world is in bondage." Knowing Subala was still lamenting, Prabhupada continued to speak about the topic on both their minds. "It is not so wonderful that Krishna Devi has left," he said. "What is wonderful is that we are able to stay and serve Krishna. The Maya is so strong. It is Krishna's divine energy, and for someone to actually stay engaged in Krishna's service is very rare. The living entity is practically helpless under the sway of Maya's power, and can only cry out to Krishna for help. But we have to pray at every moment that the power of Maya does not disturb us." Subala continued to live with Prabhupada, cooking for him, tending to his personal needs, and carving deities of Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada wrote Krishna Devi again, quote, "Your husband, Sriman Subal Das, is living with me very peacefully, and he is carving Radha Krishna from hardwood. So this life of material existence is just like hardwood, and if we can carve Krishna out of it, that is the success of our life. So, at any circumstance, you must not forget Krishna. I love you at my heart, and therefore I gave you the name Krishna Devi Dasi. Don't forget Krishna even for a single moment. Chant Hare Krishna loudly or slowly as it may be convenient, but don't forget to chant the holy name. I hope everything will be all right as soon as you come here with Randy. I'm awaiting your arrival with great interest." Unquote. One day after a walk, Prabhupada told Aniruddha that Los Angeles reminded him of Bombay, and that he wanted to build a very big temple in Los Angeles. Although Aniruddha was not one to endeavor hard for building a big temple, Prabhupada still told him his vision. Another day, Prabhupada called Aniruddha in and showed him the deity of Radha and Krishna that Gaurasundar and Subala had carved. Prabhupada's eyes were shining. "I want to have Radha Krishna deities in everyone's home," he said. Aniruddha was amazed by the joyful expression on Prabhupada's face. "What can I do?" Aniruddha asked. "I want you to go to different foundries and find out the cost of casting deities." Aniruddha and Subala then phoned and visited various foundries in the Los Angeles area, returning with information. But their investigations were unbusinesslike and not well thought out. Knowing this, Prabhupada smiled and asked, "So, what intelligent news do you have for me today?" Aniruddha knew Prabhupada was criticizing him, but he could only giggle in return. He loved it. One morning, Aniruddha went to see Prabhupada with what he considered a frightening story. Before dawn, He had been out in the park collecting eucalyptus twigs for Prabhupada to use as toothbrushes. He had been standing on a park bench cutting the branch of a tree with his knife when a police car had suddenly pulled up and a policeman had rushed out of the car. "What are you doing?" the policeman demanded. Aniruddha explained that he was getting toothbrushes for his spiritual master. The policeman had said, "Don't you know that these trees belong to the city? They belong to the people of California." He had said that Aniruddha could be arrested for carrying an open knife. When he had asked Aniruddha what was in the bag around his neck, Aniruddha had shown him his beads. The policeman had then asked if Aniruddha had come from a mental institution. Prabhupada smiled to hear the story and inquired, "Did you ask him if he was crazy?" Govinda Dasi had been complaining to Aniruddha that Swamiji's apartment was too noisy and crowded, and that there were no private bathroom facilities for Swamiji. She kept insisting Aniruddha find a better place. Aniruddha, however, was getting only $200 a month from Dayananda, and with Prabhupada plus so many visitors, there was a financial strain. "Swamiji is very uncomfortable," Govinda Dasi nagged, but Aniruddha didn't know what to do. When Aniruddha asked Prabhupada if the place was all right, he said it was. Aniruddha explained that more devotees were eager to visit from San Francisco and would probably want to stay in the apartment. "Personally," Prabhupada said, "I have no suggestion myself. It is up to them, whatever they decide." Prabhupada had his translating to do, but he also wanted to see his disciples. For Aniruddha, however, the prospect of more devotees coming to visit was a cause of anxiety. Finally, he and Dayananda found a larger apartment for Swamiji. The new apartment was 4 rooms over a private garage in the rear of an apartment complex. Aniruddha painted, and some of the other devotees helped prepare the apartment as comfortably as possible for Prabhupada. Then they moved him in. The landlord, a small Japanese man, came by, and seeing Prabhupada seated on the floor behind his trunk, asked, "Where's your furniture?" He seemed suspicious. Prabhupada smiled, thanked him, and said it was all right. "We can sit down anywhere," Prabhupada explained. "We are mendicant." But after leaving, the landlord kept standing outside on the landing, peeking through the window. "Tell him to go away," Prabhupada said to Aniruddha. At the temple during the evening program, Srila Prabhupada would sometimes ask one of his disciples to speak after the kirtan. Dayananda. One night, I was driving Swamiji to the temple. He asked me to speak. I immediately thought I would rather not. Although in Swamiji's absence his other disciples had given talks, I had never given even an informal talk, so I told Swamiji I preferred to hear him speak, but he said he preferred to hear me. So it was settled. At the temple we had kirtan as usual, and then I began to speak. I was speaking on the validity of God, trying to prove that God's existence was logical and scientifically reasonable. Such a talk should have been given with reference to the Vedic literature, but my fund of knowledge was not embellished by verses from the scripture, nor was it even adequately based on basic Krishna-conscious philosophy. I was aware that my talk wasn't adequate, a fact that Prabhupada himself brought home in the sweetest way possible. When at one point I made a mistake and said the wrong thing altogether, Prabhupada matter-of-factly interrupted, explaining the point I had misstated. He then motioned me to go on. I continued without any loss of face. I was being corrected in public, but without the embarrassment that a chastisement might cause. Swamiji's correction was always based on love and sincerity, in relation to the goal rather than to the ego. On the appearance day of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Prabhupada gathered some of his disciples, Aniruddha, Govinda Dasi, Gaurasundar, Nanda Rani, and a boy named Sankarshan, for a special celebration. In the kitchen of his apartment, Prabhupada cooked a feast for his spiritual master. Nanda Rani brought flowers, and Prabhupada led the devotees in a ceremony of offering flowers and chanting prayers in honor of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Nanda Rani: I had my daughter Chandramukhi with me then. She was about 2 months old and was sitting very quietly in a little basket in a corner of the room. After the ceremony, Swamiji gathered a handful of flowers, walked over to the basket where Chandramukhi was lying, and placed the flowers around her head. He smiled and said, "One day I will take you to India with me." After the feast, the devotees followed Prabhupada into his room. He sat at his desk and read letters aloud to the small gathering of his disciples seated on the floor before him. The letters were of appreciation, and these letters became Srila Prabhupada's offering to his spiritual master. Prabhupada read aloud statements like, "We really like chanting. We're happy since we met you. We're trying to teach other people how to chant Hare Krishna." Simple sentiments. Reading the letters, Prabhupada became very happy. He then put the letters, along with the flowers, before the picture of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Then, looking at Nanda Rani, he asked, "Have you become happy since you have been chanting Hare Krishna?" "Oh yes," Nanda Rani replied. "My life is wonderful." Looking at the others, Prabhupada asked, "And what about you? Do you feel more satisfied since you have been chanting Hare Krishna?" They all answered yes. "Then I have only one request," Prabhupada continued. "Whatever happiness you have felt, you simply tell someone else about that. That is all you have to do. You don't need to teach anything. You don't need to teach the philosophy. You just explain to people that because you chant Hare Krishna, you have become happy. And if they chant, they will become happy. Then I will be satisfied, and my spiritual master will be satisfied." As Srila Prabhupada entered the storefront one evening, he was surprised to find Umapati there to greet him. Umapati had left Krishna consciousness almost a year ago, and Prabhupada had not seen him since. Spontaneously, Prabhupada went forward and embraced Umapati. A few months before, Umapati had written, indicating that he was thinking of returning, so his arrival was not a complete surprise to Srila Prabhupada. As Prabhupada took his seat, he asked Umapati about the devotees in New York. Briefly, Prabhupada reminisced how he had begun his movement in New York and how boys like Umapati had helped him. Later that evening, back at the apartment, Prabhupada expressed sadness that some of his disciples had left Krishna consciousness. He told Umapati that when the wife of one of the sannyasi disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had forcibly dragged her husband away, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had shed tears over his inability to save the disciple. "A disciple, due to Maya's influence, may fall away," Prabhupada said, "but the spiritual master will never forsake him." Umapati had left Krishna consciousness because of intellectual doubts. Having been an eclectic follower of Buddhism, he had objected to Prabhupada's explanations of Buddhism. On leaving Krishna consciousness, however, he had simply returned to his old job in a radio station, grown back his beard, and reverted to his old habits. "Whenever I saw someone doing something wrong, like eating meat," Umapati explained to Prabhupada, "I would think, 'My spiritual master said this is bad.' When you think like that," Prabhupada said, "your life at once becomes sublime." Several other devotees entered Prabhupada's room as Prabhupada talked. As a person becomes more Krishna conscious, Prabhupada explained, he becomes concerned not to cause suffering to other living beings. He doesn't want to cause suffering, even to a small insect. "Don't you feel," Prabhupada asked, imploring them with his eyes to understand the non-violence of the devotee. Umapati had left Krishna consciousness because of intellectual doubts. Having been an eclectic follower of Buddhism, he had Dayananda and Aniruddha. He decided to stay in Los Angeles and help them. He moved into the storefront with Aniruddha, got a job, and began helping support the temple. Seeing that Prabhupada was almost constantly occupied by various disciples, Lilamrta, one of the girls visiting from San Francisco, decided not to take up her spiritual master's time unnecessarily. Prabhupada noticed her frequent absence from the gatherings at his apartment. When she finally visited him, he asked her, "Why are you not coming?" "Oh, Swamiji," Lilamrta said, "you must do your translating work. I don't think you're getting your work done." "No, you don't know," Prabhupada corrected her mistake. "Don't you know my disciples are my work?" Prabhupada said he would go to as many speaking engagements as Aniruddha could obtain. Aniruddha got engagements, but there were many difficulties. On two occasions, Prabhupada, Srila, and Aniruddha were on their way to an engagement at a college when their car broke down. Another time, a policeman arrested Srila for not having a driver's license, and Prabhupada, accompanied by his servant, had to walk back to his apartment. At an engagement at the UCLA Student Center, not a single student attended. Prabhupada sat waiting for 10 minutes and then turned to Aniruddha. "So what happened?" At an outdoor engagement at Long Beach State College, there was no seat for Prabhupada, and Aniruddha had to find an umbrella to shade Prabhupada from the sun. "Aniruddha, this is not very nice," Prabhupada remarked from the podium. But there were successes also. Mukunda Das arranged for Prabhupada to appear on national television, on the Les Crane Show. He also arranged for Prabhupada to appear on the Joe Pine Show, as well as on several radio programs, and Life magazine featured Prabhupada's picture on an accompanying story as part of an article, The Year of the Guru. Although Aniruddha was prepared to arrange preaching engagements for Prabhupada for as long as he would stay, the devotees in San Francisco, New York, Montreal, and Boston had repeatedly asked Prabhupada to visit them. He had gone to India in July 1967, returning to San Francisco December 14th. He had stayed in San Francisco 3 weeks and in Los Angeles 2 months. So, while his disciples in San Francisco and Los Angeles had seen him, the others had been waiting for more than 8 months. It was time to move on. On March 7th, the day Prabhupada left Los Angeles, he thanked Aniruddha for his service in maintaining the center. "Despite my ill health," he said, "I was very comfortably situated. Krishna will bless you." "Actually, what did I do?" Aniruddha replied. "Everything was a mistake. All the engagements were messed up." "No," Prabhupada said. "That's all right. You tried your best." As Prabhupada was leaving for the airport, he had to walk from his apartment to the car. It was raining, and he had no umbrella or raincoat. Govinda Dasi frantically ran into the bathroom, tore down the shower curtain, and wrapped it around her spiritual master to protect him from the rain. Prabhupada had unlimited plans for expansion. A big city like Los Angeles deserved a big temple. Organized distribution of books on Krishna consciousness, and sophisticated cultural programs. And there should be deities of Radha and Krishna in every home. Yet, while enthusiastically planning to make everyone and everything Krishna conscious, Prabhupada waited patiently to see if a stray disciple like Krishna Devi would return. Prabhupada was ready to appear on television or meet boldly with any challenger or travel anywhere in the world, and yet he allowed Govinda Dasi to cover him with a shower curtain against the rain. The Los Angeles temple would become a great Krishna-conscious success, only with hard work and sincerity, and that, Prabhupada knew, would take time. His disciples were not yet so well trained as to make formidable advances for Krishna against the forces of Maya. Yet, by his staying for 2 months in Los Angeles, he was strengthening his disciples' Krishna consciousness, and they would continue to progress. ISKCON LA was now a little stronger. A few devotees were going to stay and help. He would come back when they had done more. March 8th, 1968. Srila Prabhupada flew from Los Angeles to San Francisco. After the slower pace of the Los Angeles Center, the activities in San Francisco encouraged Prabhupada. Quote, I think San Francisco Center has been very much sanctified by unalloyed devotional service of the members here. As soon as there are sincere devotees, immediately the situation changes favorably. Unquote. The morning and evening meetings drew crowds of interested young people, and Srila Prabhupada observed, dancing in ecstasy is often exhibited to the transcendental pleasure of everyone present. Prabhupada was witnessing the success of the Sankirtan movement. He had planted the seed, and now the plant of Krishna Bhakti was flowering. To revisit a center and see that his disciples, by sincerely following his orders, were advancing in Krishna consciousness increased Prabhupada's bliss and satisfaction. He was witnessing the power of kirtan to transform the fallen souls, and to see his smile of approval increased the ecstasy of the devotees. Guru Das showed Prabhupada slides of the Krishna deity Prabhupada had named Karta Mishana. One picture showed Karta Mishana shortly after the devotees had obtained him from an import store and placed him in the temple. Other slides showed Karta Mishana after the devotees had been regularly worshipping him and offering him food. As Prabhupada viewed the slides, he began to chuckle. I think the deity has changed. Guru Das reviewed the slides. Sure enough, Karta Mishana had become bluer and plumper. Has he been painted or anything? Umapati asked. Guru Das said they hadn't done anything to him. You have been taking care of him, Prabhupada affirmed. Bhakti Yoga was a scientific law. As one approached Krishna, he reciprocated. Wherever Prabhupada's disciples were following the process carefully, he saw the improvement. Krishna consciousness, he said, was a treatment of the diseased soul by medicine and diet. The medicine was chanting Hare Krishna, and the diet was prasadam. If one followed this program, he would be rejuvenated. If one neglected it, he would relapse. Srila Prabhupada found both health and illness. Upendra, Prabhupada's personal servant in San Francisco, came before Prabhupada crying. He said he couldn't overcome his sex urge. He had engaged in illicit sex. When he asked if Krishna forgives offenses, Prabhupada consoled him. Yes, Krishna forgives. Upendra asked if he could overcome his lust by getting married. No, you are too young, Prabhupada said. You should stay away from rich food. Eat starvishly. He told Upendra to take unspiced dal and chapatis without butter. After a few weeks in San Francisco, Srila Prabhupada flew to New York, where the devotees greeted him with a grand airport reception. A city newspaper ran an article, Guru Returns. The New York Center at 26 2nd Avenue had improved, and there were new faces and enthusiastic kirtans. Quote, here are many new flower-like young boys and girls, and they are all so much interested in Krishna consciousness very seriously. I am surprised at their great enthusiasm, and I am very happy amongst them. Unquote. Prabhupada stayed in his old rooms at 26 2nd Avenue. Although there had been talk of getting him another residence, everything had been too expensive. Prabhupada had assured Brahmananda, I would like to stay in my apartment. If it is silent and solitary, I feel pleasure to live there, better than elsewhere. Although Srila Prabhupada's plans were to stay in New York less than 2 weeks, he talked of staying longer if his disciples could arrange for him to work steadily at his translating, and would help him publish his books one after another. Prabhupada had written Brahmananda, quote, I want to sit down tightly with some assistants and spend the rest of my time translating Srimad Bhagavatam and other books. and trains students to do preaching on the outside. So, from now on, I would like to speak only at very important engagements, and for most engagements have my students preach. All of you must learn to preach, and for me, my most important preaching work is to finish up the Srimad Bhagavatam. So please, try to make arrangement like this, as it is very important that my books be finished as soon as possible." Unquote. One day, while Prabhupada was sitting in his room receiving his massage, he began talking and laughing. As he sat on the floor with one leg tucked under his body and one leg outstretched before him, he told the 2 or 3 devotees present how Krishna, carrying the lunch his mother had packed for him, would go to the forest with his cowherd boyfriends, who were also carrying lunches from home. Krishna and his friends would all sit together sharing their lunch, and Krishna always had the best ladus and kachoris. Prabhupada's eyes flashed, and he rubbed his hands together, smiling. "I simply want to go to Krishna Loka so I can have some of Krishna's ladu and kachoris. I do not have any great diversion from this. I simply want to go there so that I can enjoy eating ladus and kachoris with Krishna and the cowherd boys." Opening his eyes widely, he glanced at Devananda, who was massaging him, and at the others in the room. "Oh," he said to them, "if you will give me ladus and kachoris, then I will bless you." "Swamiji, please teach us how to make ladus and kachoris," the devotees replied excitedly. "We will definitely make them for you." "Yes," Prabhupada assured them, "I shall show you. I shall teach you." And he went on talking in a jovial way. Newcomers in New York wanted to be initiated. One boy had seen Prabhupada's picture in Life magazine, cut it out, and put it in his high school locker. A boy named Jay, after having read about Prabhupada and the devotees in Evergreen Review, had visited the temple and found that everyone was devoted to Prabhupada. Some disciples whom Prabhupada had initiated by mail, like Indira and Ekayani, 2 sisters still in high school and living at home, were meeting their spiritual master for the first time. Prabhupada initiated all the eligible newcomers. The day before Prabhupada left for Boston, he lectured at the New York State University at Stony Brook, a 2-hour drive from the temple. Brahmananda. The engagement was in a huge auditorium with rows of seats, and the house was full. The bleachers were completely packed. As we came in, it was dark, just some spotlights on us, and everything else was dark. The rows of seats went back and up, and we could hardly see the audience. First, we held kirtan, and then Prabhupada spoke. As Prabhupada was speaking, we could hear the sound of chairs popping up as the students were getting up and leaving. But Prabhupada just went right on lecturing, as if he weren't aware of it. By the time the lecture was over, there were only about 24 people left. After the program, the devotees discovered that the car Prabhupada was supposed to ride in had already left. A student stepped forward, however, and offered his Triumph sports car, a tiny 2-seater. Prabhupada didn't like the car, but it was the only thing available. So Brahmananda drove Prabhupada back to Manhattan. Around midnight, Prabhupada dozed while Brahmananda speeded, hurrying to get back to the temple as soon as possible. Prabhupada was dozing peacefully when Brahmananda hit a large pothole, and Prabhupada struck his head on the metal bar on the roof of the car. When finally they returned to the Lower East Side, it was past midnight, and there would only be a few hours for resting before Prabhupada would have to catch his 9 a.m. flight to Boston. Although Prabhupada rose that morning on schedule, most of the devotees were still asleep when he left the apartment. At the airport, Prabhupada commented that his disciples, rather than simply praising him, should try to follow his example and rise early.